May 24th, 1997. Gateway International Raceway just outside St. Louis. Driver Scott Pruitt has had an incident. What was once a race car moving at nearly a football field per second has shuddered to a stop. Its sleek chassis now a shower of carbon fiber. The force at impact? 70 Gs. The equivalent of having a 5-ton weight slammed against the driver's head and chest.
I hit the wall hard. I mean, really hard. I did not have a bruise, bump, scratch, nothing on my body. Nothing. I mean, there was nothing.
This is a good sight, Scott Pruitt. I'm glad to see you standing and being able to talk to me, because that was one wicked crash.
Today, Scott Pruitt walked away. 7 years ago, after this accident in West Palm Beach, he didn't.
I had broke both my heels, shattered my left ankle. I mean, shattered. It was just blown to pieces. Broke both my knees and broke 2 vertebrae in my back. And then being trapped in the car for an hour and a half, and then not really being able to give me any sort of pain medication, that was tough. You really can't put it into words. I mean, there's just no way to really describe it.
The story of his recovery and of the birth of the technology that protected him last May is one whose landmarks have too often been made from twisted metal and mangled flesh.
The way they took me out of the car, and I guess the way I was trapped in the car, you know, when it first happened, I knew it was going to be bad. And if it had been the old days, you know, with a helmet and they're pulling you out, my damn feet would have probably still been in there.
For its soul, it draws strength from the relentless determination of the driver, not only to survive, but to drive again.
I think that anyone that does anything wants, when they decide to wind it down and stop doing it, they want to do that at their own pace. They don't want to be forced into doing it.
Who's going to take his legs? Who's going to grab his legs? Mike.
Its guiding force is the work of many unsung heroes. This man is one of them, orthopedic surgeon Dr. Terry Trammell. Tonight, the career of the racer's doctor, as told by the men whose careers and bodies he put back together again.
How do you thank somebody for putting your feet back on?
Hi, I'm Jason Priestley. I'm sure most of you know me from my work in television and movies, but I'm here to tell you about another side of my life, one that's become very important to me, competing in the sport of auto racing. A few years ago, I formed my own team, and now I'm racing in both the Exxon Supreme GT Series and the Sports Car Speedvision Cup for stock sports cars. As a driver, I know the risks involved, but I also know about the incredible safety net that exists for a racer should an accident occur. Tonight, I'd like to introduce you to part of that safety net in the form of one very special person. His name is Dr. Terry Trammell. His specialty? He puts drivers back together again, literally. He takes crushed bone and torn tendons and makes them whole. And in doing so, he gives back what racing has taken away. This is his story. But it's only part of a larger drama, for Dr. Trammell's ability to heal has touched the lives of some of the sport's best-known athletes. They are all the king's men, healed by the unique combination of medicine and intuition that is the art of Dr. Terry Trammell. So let's begin. But first, I have to caution you, some of the footage you are about to see is graphic, but it'll help us all to understand and appreciate the life-saving science of orthopedic medicine and the way it can keep racers everywhere from paying the terrible price this sport can exact. We're going back in time. Imagine you're a young doctor. It's May 1981, Indianapolis. The eyes of the world are focused on racing's historic rite of spring, the Indy 500. For a month, nearly every news story, social event, even casual conversation around town has been about one thing: who will win? Now, finally, all this anticipation explodes in a barrage of color, blimps, marching bands, and sleek race cars as nearly half the city packs the stands surrounding the famed 2.5-mile oval. But of the 400,000 fans shoehorned into the confines at 16th and Georgetown, you are not one of them. In fact, you're not even on the grounds. As low man on the totem pole, you're the on-call doctor at Methodist Hospital, the day of the world's greatest single-day sporting event. You get the call. Driver Danny Ungaius has hit the wall in a ball of flame. The entire front end of his car has been torn away, dragging his feet and legs along the racetrack until what's left of the chassis slides to a stop along the course's outer wall. He has sustained massive injuries. Some observers believe it's a miracle he survived the crash at all. Now driver Danny Ungaius is on his way to you. You know what you're going to do. What you don't know is how this moment will change your life forever.
And there was a Vietnam-trained vascular surgeon that had just come back from Vietnam not much before that. And we looked at the thing and said, well, we got one shot to save this leg, and we can't do all the traditional, you know, get an arteriogram and all these special x-rays. We just got to go do this, or it's not going to survive. And really, the vascular surgeon was the hero that day, because he said, you just do whatever you need to do for the leg. And we did some things that were real cutting edge at the time, that were battlefield type technology, just see how fast you can get it fixed and get it revascularized. And it worked well. I mean, he's got his leg.
And that was the first time Dr. Terry Trammell helped save life and limb. It would not be the last.
A year later, I go back to the track to pick up my credentials as a photographer, and they won't give them to me. They said, your credentials are over in the medical unit in the hospital, and that's where your credentials will come from now on.
For the next 3 years, Dr. Trammell settled into a comfortable niche, enjoying his new part-time career, but this relative calm was only destiny moving at its own pace. Soon, Dr. Trammell would be faced with the greatest challenge of his medical career, in the form of a long-distance phone call that would change the course of racing history.
You know, it was Steve Alvey called from Montreal, and he said, actually it was in some hospital in Saint-Air, called and said, Mears has just had this horrible accident, and the speeder all messed up, and Roger's plane's on the way to get you. Go to the airport. Don't forget your passport. Bye.
I can't imagine four. I can't imagine what a fourth one would be like. I mean, because like I said, I never dreamed of a first one. And the second one was better, and the third one was unbelievable. So I can't imagine what a fourth one would be like if it would happen to happen.
No man has stood in victory lane at Indianapolis more often than Rick the Rocket. He is one of an elite group of drivers with 4 Indy wins. But imagine if his career had been cut short. Imagine Rick Mears confined to a wheelchair for life. Imagine Rick Mears with no feet. 4 months after he won Indy for the second time, this scenario almost became a reality. Mears was involved in this spectacular crash at Saint-Air.
The physician there actually thought that it would be very likely for the need to amputate both of Rick's feet, and I thought that sounded awfully extreme and wasn't prepared to accept that diagnosis. And Roger Penske was with me, and at the time said, who would you consult with for a second opinion if you had your choice?
When I got up there and saw the films, is you couldn't identify anything that looked like parts of his feet. I mean, everything was just powder. And the guy up there was like, he was probably taken 1 million x-rays and was showing me all these films and said, well, I don't think any of this is fixable. And I was like, well, I think we don't have any choice. This has got to be something, we just got to do whatever.
And I never realized how bad it was until sometime later when I heard the stories of Terry Trammell, or of Terry going back home after the first operation and kind of destroying his kitchen a little bit because he thought he had probably lost the right foot, didn't think it was going to make it.
So I got home and I didn't know what else to do, you know, whatever, but I couldn't really sleep, and I just sat there in the kitchen and watched. My kitchen windows face east, and I just sat there and watched until the sun came up. As soon as I saw the sun come up, it was like, okay, it's fine. It's time to get in the car and go back to sea. And that was all we could do. So I went back and looked, and he had all his toes. He still has all his toes. So,
I mean, had this happened 2 or 3 years earlier, I wouldn't be driving race cars, you know, and I think the technology plus them taking it to a new level is what made all the difference.
In 1984, most of the foot surgery world was taking care of bunions and, you know, painful feet with old ladies and hammer toes and so on and so forth, but it hadn't evolved to the level of expertise that the trauma hand people had developed. I mean, the hand surgery world was light years ahead of what we were doing for feet. So I said, well, you know, look at a monkey, their hands and feet are the same thing. They're just on different ends of their body, so why not treat the feet like hands and see what happens? And all I did was do everything to Rick's feet that people would have done to a hand that was mangled in the same way. And it was sort of trial and error. I mean, there wasn't any textbook to go by or published papers or anybody else's work. I just did everything that the hand docs did.
The next season, Mears was not only back in a race car, he won the 500-miler at Pocono, and then went on to win Indy again in '88 and '91. Yet according to Dr. Trammell, there is another story to tell, and it involves the private side of Rick Mears. For no one but Rick himself will ever know the superhuman effort it took to come back.
It looked like he'd been burned from his toes to about mid-calf from all the blistering and swelling, and the skin just, it all got necrotic from the pressure. It was a real touch-and-go thing. In fact, we treated him like burns. The skin as if they were burned with every 12-hour dressing changes with all the burn stuff. That had to be incredibly painful. And he had these little miniature external fixators on his feet, which are little gadgets that look like a little erector set. And his feet were so mangled and shortened, and I'd go in every morning after we put them on, I'd lengthen them back out to get it where I wanted it. And as soon as I'd leave, he'd crank them back down because it hurt too bad. Of course, he didn't tell me that, and I could never understand why I wasn't getting anywhere.
That was the toughest part, and that's what I had to do. What helped the most was just saying to myself, saying, it can always be worse. It could always be worse. When I'd start getting down, you know, I'd have to tell his head, they could be gone. You know, it could always be worse, so I'm in great shape.
We tried to structure all these physical therapy, rehab, car simulators, and so on and so forth. Rick just took a motorbike, went out in the desert and climbed around in the rocks and shot at gophers or whatever, and played with his dirt toys in the desert outside Bakersfield, and that's how he got his feet working again. And there wasn't any real formal therapy like we have for everybody now. He just did his own thing. It was like Rick's always been. He just sort of figured out what he needed to do and did it.
You know, you could see the light at the end of the tunnel, and that light was getting back in that race car. And so I didn't really think about it being that hard. The best therapy I had was when I did get back in the race car, and it was about 5 months after the accident. Still couldn't walk yet. You know, I could hobble a little bit on crutches, but I was in a wheelchair most of the time. So, you know, they wheeled me up to the car and picked me up and slid me in the car. And, you know, I went out and I made a couple warm-up laps and got the car up to speed a little bit and came back in. And they checked everything out. And, went out, I was going to lean on it this time. And I ran 6, 8, 10 laps, 12 laps, whatever it was. And I came in the pit. I stopped. The guys all leaned in the cockpit. I said, well, how was it? And I said, well, you know, we're pushing down here in the middle of 1 and 2, and it's a little on the nervous side coming out of 4. And they all of them just started rolling on the ground laughing. They said, no, how are your feet? That's what we want to know about.
And also, I'd like to thank Dr. Trammell, who's standing over in the back, for allowing me to be sitting here with my feet at the end of my legs so I can drive next year.
Drivers don't get scared or frightened with racing cars, but when you get in deep trouble, you do look for a comfort zone or somebody to tell you that, you know, things are maybe not that bad. And Terry was one of those people that, you know, you wanted to see.
A racing accident can have many causes. Driver error, mechanical failure, an act of God.
Okay, just stay down. Let us do it.
handle this
Okay?
car.
All right, take his helmet.
Okay, I want his helmet.
I got his neck. Let's take his helmet.
His helmet's coming off now.
What hurts? What's hurting you? My legs. Head, legs. My knee. Your knees.
You guys got to come up here and start
Okay, his
working on
knees.
this
We're gonna
car
have to
right
do
now.
him. We've got to get him out in full wheel deal.
Up here with Trammell.
They have one thing in common. A human pilot with a surprising capacity to remember.
Every millisecond of what happened in '84, except the time that actually made contact with the wall. But I was awake and alert before the car ever stopped rolling, because I can remember my feet out on the racetrack dangling as the car still came to a standstill. And from then on until they put me under to do surgery, I remember every millisecond.
just instinctively, my feet tried to move to slow the car down because I was still rolling after I hit him. And I couldn't get to the brake pedal. I couldn't push on the brake pedal. And I thought, okay, you know, something's wrong. And then the car came to rest. And then I looked down, and, you know, my legs were all pointed in the wrong direction. I thought, oh, here we go. You know, this is nasty.
I could see my leg was broken because it hung off to an unusual angle, and I began to make up the time I'd lose out of a racing car by how many bones I had broken. I thought, well, a leg is 6 weeks. If the ankle's done, that might be 2 months. I mean, that was the stupid psychology of a racing driver, even at that early stage, that no matter how badly you're hurt, you still want to get back in the car. However, when I got into the hospital and reality set in, then I wasn't sure.
Let me know when you're ready, I'll call it.
Okay, you call it, go down.
Coming out on three, on three. 1, 2, 3.
Get the legs, get the legs, get the legs. Let him down, let him down. Leave him there a minute, leave him there.
Ready?
Right here on the shoulders, David.
Your shoulders, not his neck. On three, on three. 1, 2, 3. Up the PIDs up.
Okay. I think the unusual thing about Terry or the motorsports doctors that deal with accidents, they seem to surround you with the type of people that allow you to get back doing what you want to do quickly. In other words, it's not something, well, make the best of it, this is as good as you're going to get. It's make the best of it, here's the best people, and if you do this, you will get back to that level.
I think that's what orthopedics really is. I mean, that's the whole mindset of the sports medicine doctor that makes them attractive to athletes is the whole goal is, you know, how well can we do to help you get back to your chosen sport. And this is a sport like any other sport. And it'd be like the football doctor saying, well, I'm not going to take care of the football player because he might get hurt again. If I make him well enough to play football, then he'll be right back here again. Well, the object's to make him well enough to be able to do his sport again and hope that he's gained enough experience and insight to not have the same thing happen to him again if it's within his control.
Yep. Okay, right, let's go this way.
that way.
Which way are you going?
Straight back. Over the tail.
Let's go.
Somebody on the other side here.
Let it go. Let the tail keep coming.
Okay, got it?
I got it. I got it. Stop there.
Stop.
Wiggle. Just go to the head. Stop.
Here you go.
Here. Now you got it. Okay. Come on, guys. Let's step back from the fence.
Okay.
Yep. He was just briefly unconscious.
Your case, is he complaining about head or back pain at all or not?
No, he's not complaining about anything but his knees. But he was a little dazed when we got to him, so I joined it this way. You're really lucky because I went to karate class last night and I didn't get beat up. And usually I get beat up so bad. And I came out of work the next day.
But what's the noise? Hi, guys. Wave to them.
What I do when I go to surgery is that I pretty well plan everything out ahead of time. Literally with drawings or paper tracings, mark up the x-rays. Anything that I think I'm going to have to do in surgery, it's all thought out ahead of time and it's literally all mapped out. And I'm not above taking, if I'm going to do an operation that's been described in the literature, I'll take the drawings from the articles or whatever and have it all laid out just like a map. And then I figure out that's plan A. And then the next thing I figure out is what happens if parts of this or all of this won't work, so I have a plan B. And if it's something really complicated or risky, I'll have a C, D, E, F. So that I can kind of roll from one to the other without looking like I don't know what I'm doing. It just makes a smooth transition. And it gives some depth. I mean, surgery's not an exact science, so that if you have the forethought to know what you're going to do if, you sort of don't have to be extemporaneous, and it works.
The more you get to know Terry, the more casual he seems to be about serious injury. I mean, we almost get killed, and it's casual for him. I can remember I had, I think, 18 screws, 4 plates, and a rod rebuilding my left leg. And as the swelling began to go down, he would take a couple of screws out. Well, one day, the swelling went down so dramatically, 3 Allen head screws popped out through my skin. So I called Terry all worried and concerned. He said, well, you better come down. I go down, sit up on a desk, which is like his workbench. He looks at it, laughs, goes, grabs a toolbox. I'm in a toolbox, opens it up, takes an Allen wrench out, goes to work on me, and I say, well, hang on a second. He says, don't be a baby. He just sticks it in, screws the whole thing out, closes the toolbox up and says, okay, go home. Oh, so casual. And there I am thinking I'm having a heart attack. You know, so his casual attitude to injuries, I think, was a sense of relief almost, that, you know, maybe we're not as bad as the injuries seem to be.
Imagine you're a race car driver. You're hurtling down the main stretch at Watkins Glen, the legendary road course that was once home to the Formula One Grand Prix of the United States, a track traveled by names like Jimmy Clark, Jackie Stewart, and Graham Hill. Now picture yourself living in a driver's nightmare. You run out of road and crash at 140 miles per hour, literally destroying your legs. For IMSA GTP driver Tom Kendall, this was a scenario that became a grim reality. The youngest IMSA champion in history, and the only man to ever win 2 IMSA titles in a single year, faced the end of his promising career. Yet he's racing and dominating once again in SCCA Trans Am. And while he can truly be called one of Dr. Terry Trammell's great success stories, 6 years after his crash, Tom Kendall can neither run nor jump, but he can race.
If you look at my feet working the pedals, it's pretty simple. It looks just one on the brake, one on the gas, and I don't have a lot of feeling on the bottoms of each foot, so I can't feel the pedals like most people do. And unless you've really thought about that, you take that very much for granted. And so I have a fence on the left side of the pedal, which helps me locate my foot over the brake pedal. And now I've gotten to the point where it's second nature. I don't have to think about it. With no motion in my right ankle, everyone takes for granted that when you accelerate, you just go like that. And the minute corrections you're constantly making with the throttle, I have a little bit of motion in my forefoot, and the rest comes I have to slide my heel.
You can only do what you can do and what Mother Nature will let you do. And he has an absolutely devastating injury to his right ankle that was basically not reconstructable. And he has a painful right ankle that doesn't work very well except to drive a car. And it just happens to not work in a way that makes it work better in the car for him than it would if it worked normally to walk with.
I'm a much better driver now than I was before my accident through the experience. It does not hinder me in any way in the car. As long as I can left foot brake and shift without the clutch, it doesn't hinder me one iota.
But that's not going to last forever. I mean, sooner or later he's going to have to pay the piper and look after his ankle.
I mean, it's one of those things where I just can't, if you said, I'll give you $10 million if you can run to the trailer 10 feet away, I can't do it. I just can't physically do it. And so that's one of those things where at some point in life you can't do those things anyways as you get older. At 24 years old, that's a little bit hard to accept.
In spite of all the advances in technology, medications, microvascular plastic surgical techniques, and bone reconstruction, the medicine of Dr. Terry Trammell is not and has never been the science of miracles. It has always been the science of healing, and healing takes patience and time. On the road to recovery, the most important factor is the human equation, the stubborn determination of the driver to approach the world's most dangerous sport on his own terms, and not on the terms that catastrophe has handed him.
At times, this determination can lead to confrontation.
Mr. Voigt barks a lot worse on his bike, as long as you stay away from his left hook. He's interesting. It was a very interesting experience from the get-go with him. He has his way of doing things, and he's a take charge, be in charge kind of person. And from his initial accident, from the time he got hurt, he ran through a dirt embankment at Elkhart Lake. And there are a whole lot of stories that go with that, but the main thing was he was trapped in the car and his legs were pretty mangled up, and the car filled up with dirt because the nose had come off and it went through this embankment. And he was insistent that he didn't need to put all the stuff on that we used to extricate a driver and that he could get out of the car by himself. It's like, okay, fine. Made everybody step back, so Mr. Voigt's going to get himself out of the car. And he got all puffed up and took about a half-inch move, and of course his legs were stuck and both of them were broken, and that was, he kind of turned pale and collapsed back, and I said, okay, now we're going to do it my way, and that's the way we're going to do this through the remainder of our association. And pretty much we got along that way. We did it our way.
Like I said, I'm not going to go to this doctor no more, Trammell, and see him after what he did to me about 2 hours ago. He told me it wouldn't hurt, so I went there, and I think he fibbed to me. He took both big toenails off and one next to my little toe, and I was walking pretty good. You know, I was going to walk in right now. I'm dead lame like a horse that's been broke down. So these doctors, when they tell you it ain't going to hurt, I think every now and then they don't know what hurt is.
Let me take a look at your leg and see that. That's what's been deceptive with this all along, is it looks like it's healed. You know, you got all of this callus and stuff through here, but somewhere in the center of that is this. You know, this spike.
Where there's nothing.
Where there's nothing.
Jeremy Dale is another case in point. His injuries have been slow to heal, and he's had many heartbreaking setbacks. Here's the cause.
Lucky to be alive. I lost so much blood. I lost 30 units of blood because I had open fractures on my legs. And, you know, your body, you know, the average body holds, I guess, 10 to 12 units, something like that. So, you know, my blood supply was replenished 3 times over. So, you know, there wasn't really much talk about anything but life for that first few days, you know.
Jared, nylon.
Nylon, yeah. I usually only do this at home, privacy of my own. Well, I figure at this point I'm practically an orthopod. You know, I'm in the double digits on the surgeries now. And I've had so many procedures. I've spent so much time in rehab. I've spent so many hours in doctor's offices. I figure I'm practically there.
He's just had a horrible, horrible time to go. He had very, very severe injuries in that he broke parts of both thigh bones, the femurs, and both leg bones and bones in his ankles. He was loaded up with carbon fiber. That in itself is a learned surgical skill to get that stuff out of people, because the carbon fiber is extremely difficult to get out of wounds. It seems like every time we take 2 steps forward with him, something happens with a step back. We just can't quite get to where we're trying to get to.
I think that anyone that does anything wants, when they decide to wind it down and stop doing it, they want to do that at their own pace. They don't want to be forced into doing it. No, I don't know. You know, maybe my time is up.
This is how most fans remember the '92 Indy 500. And this is how Dr. Trammell remembers it.
All the king's men cannot put it back together again.
It was a galvanizing moment for the sport, a time when physicians, engineers, and rule makers alike began to take a hard look at the design of their winged marvels in which they were encasing their drivers.
For many years, they just stuck you in a car, they stuck some 2-part foam around you, and that was all you needed. Well, that was absolutely horrible.
We had a rash of foot and ankle injuries in 92 or so, and they lengthened the car and reconfigured the nose box to make more room and more protection for the feet. And for the most part, the foot and ankle injuries, at least up to now, have not been a problem. We have not had anybody break anything because something crushed in on them, foot and ankle in these cars. We had a problem last year with spine things, neck and upper back, and we've modified the seating arrangement. But it's been a collaborative effort.
The big thing that's happening in the medical end, though, is the merging of the medical profession with the engineering profession. There's a lot of doctors that can tell you a lot of things about human bodies and an impact. What areas of the body are strong and can take a big blow, what areas have to be cushioned properly, what sort of G-forces you can see. And then at the same time, there's this large group of engineers and designers that know how to build structures to do things.
I can't keep them from crashing. That's an inevitable part of the sport, but I don't think it's inevitable that you get hurt when you crash. And that's really the area that most interests me, and I think we've been able to influence the sport more in that direction than anything else.
There's less guesswork now. The advent of computer models has made the prediction of crash impacts more reliable. And there's a new ally in the field of rehabilitation.
This is a PTB brace. We make it out of similar material as the IndyCar is. They used to be made out of plastic, and now we make them out of Kevlar, carbon fiber, and epoxy resin for their superior strength and lightweightness.
It transfers all the weight that eventually should go on the bone to the knee and to the top part of the leg, so I shouldn't have any weight, which that would help me a lot, especially when I start walking again.
But that looks fine, and this is just where it burned out.
I think one of the unusual things about Terry Trammell is it became more than a job. He had a personal interest in the people he was dealing with. He was a fan of racing too, so he had a personal interest in seeing, you know, how could you get back and what you could do. I mean, myself and Rick, I know we had Terry's home phone number, so job hours didn't become a problem. We were down in Terry's house. You know, it became a personal relationship where he was personally interested in what you did. But then it extended to the interest in making racing cars safer. So there's all these huge, massive crush injuries that he saw too regularly. He said, can we do something about this?
It's been tremendous for our sport. The fact that their experience and their understanding and their care that they bring to the sport, Terry and Steve and that whole group, because their concern is safety, the safety of the driver. And if something was to happen, okay, well, if we do have a brake failure, how can we make the driver safer next time? If we do back it into the wall, how can we make the driver safer next time?
Think about an Indy car. It's an incredibly complex piece of machinery that has all these interrelated systems and so on and so forth, and they're always exchanging ideas, and that mentality fits into the medical side of it because it makes you look at a lot of different aspects of what you're doing and try and deal with what can I influence and what can I influence and what can I use from something else to give me the Penske advantage. You know, that's it in a nutshell. That's if you can find something that somebody else doesn't have or hasn't thought of, then you have one more chance to help the person that you're taking care of.
He probably might not tell you this. I think he is so dedicated to his patients that he's willing to break all of the rules in a hospital, do anything that's necessary to the benefit of the patient, and I like that, and I think maybe that's what I admired in him as a physician. He's willing to go beyond the boundaries or beyond the rules to benefit the patient. Makes him perfect for this type of sport.
We all have a responsibility. There's a fine line between drivers that accept the risks and making the drivers take unacceptable risks. And you can only limit the risks if everyone's doing everything they know how to do. We're learning all the time, so you can't hold it against people if they don't know. But if you're not doing everything you know how to do, then that's a crime.
You know, I'll admit it, I've had a lot of big accidents. And if I feel that if I'd been racing in the 70s or the early 80s, I don't know if I'd be around right now to be talking to you.
Unser, Villeneuve, Andretti. With these names, you can make a strong case for the idea that racing runs in the blood. Now, I don't know if there's any special DNA that makes you destined to be an orthopedic surgeon and a racing enthusiast, but if it does exist, it found its expression here, in a young Terry Ralph Trammell.
And I broke every tool my father ever owned. I could take anything apart. I was much better at taking it apart and putting it back together.
Terry and I both, as little kids, became enamored with the Indianapolis 500-mile race. And I would sit from the age of 6 until my first race at 11 and chart it and listen on the radio and keep the chart that they had in the paper, and found out that in 1984, Terry and I were talking, or 1982, whenever it was, he did the same thing.
Racing and medicine may be Dr. Trammell's passions, but they are not all there is to the man. And you might ask yourself, as I have, how someone who faces such intense pressures as a way of life finds a sense of balance away from the track and the operating room.
This is what we do to unwind. This is our motorsports park. As you can hear, the kids are running theirs. We run ours, and then we We also really enjoy shooting sports, so we can shoot sporting clays. Literally in the winter, we shoot them right straight out the front door, or out the back, weather permitting, time of day. But that's what I do as soon as I can get away from the office, get away from the hospital, I'm home here to play. I can't sit still for very long.
It's a family affair and an interesting collaboration.
Well, I raced go-karts for 10 years. I ran 100cc go-karts, enduro karts, super karts, which are 160-mile-an-hour go-karts. Won the World Championships at Daytona in 1989.
Those are the tire temperatures, left front, left rear, right rear. You can see your right front's cooking. When it hits about 300 degrees, it'll go away.
Give me a theory on what he thought, how he thought something happened, and I'll usually say, well, that's probably not the case, because if you went into the corner this way, you know, I would start bringing up more technical points from a driver's point of view.
More than that, the Trammell door is always open.
I had broken my foot in '95 at a go-kart track, and Terry said, well, why don't you just come out and fly out to Indy and come stay at my house, we'll go get it looked at. And we went and looked at it, and it was broken, and it was a week before a race. And I went to Terry's house, and he operated on it the next morning, and I stayed there through the rest of the week, and he just said, you know, had his kids help make me food, and I slept in his spare bed.
And we've gone to his house for dinner, and you know, he's always ready to go out and shoot some trap and the guns, and you know, kick his feet up and have a good time with everybody.
Jeremy Dale was here the other night, and we had dinner, and we went down and raced on the simulator, and he made it difficult to drive.
He's a guy, I think, that does this because he really loves it, because he loves racing, he loves the people in the racing business, he likes to be part of it.
When you know that you've got somebody with his caliber and his experience, and he's got his door to his house open for you to come and rehab in his living room, it's awfully nice. And you know, you tend not to rehab. He's got a nice big screen TV, and you kick your feet up on the table, and you know, his hospitality is second to none.
For nearly an hour now, we've talked about risk and danger and painful recoveries. But the career of Dr. Terry Trammell is also about personalities, and he's met an incredible collection of them. So just in case the good doctor never gets the chance to write his memoirs, we've committed some of his best recollections to videotape.
Al Jr. was an interesting ordeal. Stuck his nose under a guardrail and broke his ankle. I knew exactly when he was coming back to Indianapolis, and we had an OR all set up, what was wrong. So we were just going to take him right straight from the ambulance to the operating room, fix his ankle, and be done with it on a Sunday night. Well, they called and said the plane had landed. He came back in a private plane. The plane had landed, and he was on his way to the hospital. It takes about 20 minutes from the airport to Methodist. 30 minutes goes by, and there's no little Al. And we know he's in the ambulance, he's on his way. And this goes on and on. We're on 45 minutes to an hour waiting on little Al.
For some reason, I was able to talk the ambulance driver into stopping at Wendy's and grabbing me a burger before we got to that hospital, because I knew the hospital food was bad.
They finally show up, pull up in the ambulance, and I'm like, you know, doing one of these things, looking at the watch. They open the back doors of the ambulance, and all this stuff from Wendy's falls out of the back of the ambulance. French fries and wrappers and burgers.
I figured this is going to be my last meal, and so I talked him into going through that Wendy's.
And he said, Trammell, I don't feel good. You know, most of his dinner was all very well. One of the things you can't do is operate on somebody for about 8 hours after they've had something to eat, because they have a possibility of regurgitating it and aspirating it, getting it down in their lungs. And he was already regurgitating it, so it's like, well, I guess we won't be operating on you tonight. Shirley's petite, and I needed to use a device that was a Swiss external fixator at that point in time to treat her leg. She had an area in the lower part of her leg that wasn't healing, and I needed to fasten a clamp to her heel. Well, her heel is too small for the smallest clamp, an adult-sized clamp. And I was like, this is Friday afternoon, I'm supposed to operate on Monday or Tuesday, and I sort of panicked about how can I get this fixed? Well, I called Jim McGee at Patrick Racing, and I said, can you make a part for me? And they're like, sure, that's what we do. We make parts all day long.
And we agreed. He sent the part to us in a car. We remachined the part.
And I'd already talked to the manufacturer of the implant, and they said 6 months, if they do it at all. And so they were like, well, if you want to wait on it now, or if you're not in a big hurry, you can come back in the morning. So I said, well, I think I could wait until the morning. So I went over back earlier Saturday morning, and they made this absolutely gorgeous parts for this thing, much nicer than came from the manufacturer. And we just breezed through the surgery.
It was an interesting situation, but that's how it works with the race people. I mean, we can react and do things quickly, and this was an emergency that probably would only happen once in a lifetime.
He is very claustrophobic. He had an incident occur when he was a child. I guess Roger pushed him under the pool cover or whatever, and he got stuck under the pool cover, and is to this day very, very claustrophobic, which is odd for an IndyCar driver that's packed into a little capsule with one of their heads sticking out. Well, we wanted to do hyperbaric oxygen therapy on his legs, and the Methodist has single patient chambers which look like a big test tube.
But the problem was that it took 20 to 30 minutes to get the pressure that they needed. But then what would worry me, or what would get to me claustrophobically, was the fact that I knew if I said I want out of here, it was going to be another 30 minutes before I could get out.
We got a psychiatrist who's a very well-known hypnotist. And I said, okay, this is great. We'll just hypnotize you and put you in the chamber.
I mean, you're in a glass tube, you're watching TV, you know, got the sound, and they can pipe in music, whatever you want, you know, but I still just couldn't handle it. So they tried to hypnotize me and everything else to get me to get in that thing.
Well, it worked fine as long as the psychiatrist was there. Well, the guy's a little bit eccentric, and right in the middle of one of these HBO sessions, he realizes that he forgot to do something, and he bolts from the room, and here's Rick in the chamber, and I'm sitting there not knowing what's going to happen next. He forgot to put money in the parking meter, and he's like making a beeline out to the street to put money in the parking meter instead of sending one of us. And Rick wakes up in the tube, comes out of his hypnosis.
Finally, I just threw my hands up and said, no way, I'm not going to get in that thing again.
Well, Mother Pruitt really organized this. I just participated.
Well, you have to imagine, here I was, both my legs were casted. I had lost probably at that point about 30 pounds, and I'm talking I only weigh 150 pounds anyway, so I was looking pretty bad. I could hardly sit up for more than 15, 20 minutes before I just felt miserable. I had a big old back brace that I had to wear. I had these tubes and lines and stuff running out of my body, and I'm turning 30 in the hospital, right?
They hired a exotic dancer to be his nurse, and she came in all in the nursing uniform, and really we'd coached her a little bit so she knew the right things to do. And Scott had been running a fever a little bit when concerned about why, and his mom sort of bugged the thermometer so that it registered a fever, and I'd come over wringing my hands with concern.
And this nurse comes walking in, thinking, yeah, okay, all right. And then she starts, you know, checking me out, and all of a sudden I'm going, oh, this is a little different than these other nurses.
And she's got this Velcro breakaway dress on that's coming apart a piece at a time until it's finally pretty well off.
It was a great way to cheer me up to time.
The first time somebody's hurt, it's not as difficult. I mean, even if you know them well, because then it's like, well, you know, okay, now it's my turn to do my job, and we'll impart a certain confidence to them. But in doing that and going through all their recovery and their rehab, it really forms a bond. It's the second time they get hurt.
So we're back where we started. Gateway International. A day at the races with little cause for concern. But there on the course, a moment happened. Not seen by you or me, or by any of the thousands at the track or watching worldwide. A silent communication between the racer's doctor and a friend.
You know the fellow well enough that you don't even have to say much other than just, you know, I'm here. Do I need to be? sort of thing, and the communication's almost nonverbal. It's, I'm okay, you know, you don't need to worry. And it's like, I'm still worried, you don't need to be worried. Okay, I'll go sweep the track.
There's a poem that I wrote, just from a perspective of what it meant to have him make people better. And he works on people and they trust him, and especially drivers who have a dream and they're chasing that dream. And he helps the drivers and people keep their dream going, you know, and that's important to anybody.
To a man so special to so many people, the abilities to repair injury, the ability to keep one's dream alive. You're an angel in the lives of many. You bring light in darkest times. Your hands are like the rays of the sun that come down and shine on us, into our being, down to the bone, to heal and nourish our souls. Thank you.
For 16 years, Dr. Terry Trammell has made a difference in an arena that too often combines triumph and tragedy in a single afternoon. What he has learned about the sport is this: danger plays no favorites. And Dr. Trammell's list of patients include both legendary greats and journeymen, racers all with one thing in common. They choose to live life on the edge because there is a passion inside them saying they cannot exist any other way. And should the time come when the violent forces under their command slip loose from the fragile flesh and blood that guides them, Dr. Trammell and physicians like him will be there to restore what fate can so quickly take away. For in the world of high-tech and G-forces, it is still in that moment when a racer dares to surpass all limits and celebrate victory for having done so that this sport truly lives. Before we close, special thanks to Championship Auto Racing Teams and Orthopedics of Indianapolis for all their help in making this program possible. Good night, everybody. See you on the circuit.